When I was in my early 20s, I worked as a psychiatric nurse. So it's always interested me, the workings of the mind. And I saw people come in, I saw them drugged, I saw them go through therapy, but the same people kept coming back. I really didn't see that there was a huge amount of success. And then when I had my baby and started to look at natural medicine, I did not want to give my children drugs. I saw that they had side effects. And so in the back of my mind was also, yes, I see that natural medicine brings about healing in the body. And when I surrendered my heart to God, that's when for the first time in my life I found peace. But in the back of my mind was still, what about mental illness? What role does that play? What about depression? The Proverbs 14 verse 6 says, knowledge is easy to him that understands. And I like to work on that principle, that when we know how the body works, then we start to know how it heals. So we're going to do a quick anatomy and physiology lesson on the brain. And the brain, we're going to break it up into just two parts. There are many parts in the brain. Looking from top down, the brain looks a little bit like a walnut. I think God's got a sense of humour because the walnut is high in omega-3, and that's a fatty acid that the brain needs to be able to function properly. That's why before you're going to do some mental activity, make sure you've got some walnuts in your meal. From side on, the brain looks a little bit like a slug, but I want to particularly go to these two lobes here. These two lobes, medicine calls the prefrontal cortex. Now the cortex part of the brain really takes up this top part of the brain. In the front part, it takes up about a third of the brain. And I found fascinating that historically young men were not given positions of responsibility until the age of 30. And science now shows that this prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until the age of 30. You see, then the prefrontal cortex is where our reasoning powers reside. In our prefrontal cortex is where our intellect is. It's in our prefrontal cortex that judgment takes place. This is the fourth function of the prefrontal cortex. The will is the governing power in the nature of man. It is the power of decision or of choice. And what also I find very interesting about the prefrontal cortex is this is where God communicates with man. Now it sounds very easy, but something comes in that muddies the waters, so to speak. And that is our limbic system. Our limbic system basically takes up about that much, looking at the side. Our limbic system is called emotional brain. And I want to show you how our emotional brain and our prefrontal cortex, how they work together. You see, God designed this prefrontal cortex to be our board of senses, our board of critiques. It's like a sieve. So the emotions, the feelings, the thoughts, they go through there. And at any point, we can say, nah. Or at any point, we can say, yeah, that sounds good. That's where our critical thinking is. That's why I say to people, if you're in a situation, maybe you visited the doctor, you've got the results of your tests, and he says you've got this and this must start straight away, the best thing to say is, thank you so much for your advice. I'm going to seriously consider this. And you leave and you consider your options. And the amount of people that have said to me, if only I'd had time to consider my options. Rather than quick, we can get you in right now. God gave us a brain where we can consider these things. But let's have a look at how the emotions can muddy the water, so to speak. So on the right side of the prefrontal cortex is the I won't decision. On the left side of the prefrontal cortex is the I will. Right in the middle is I want. You see, the highest function of the prefrontal cortex is foresight. Looking ahead at what may happen and making decisions now, considering what's ahead. Did you know that God has a divine appointment with every human being early in the morning? But there's a great deceiver out there. There's a great deceiver out there who wants to trick us. And do you remember those two systems we looked at? One system is based on fear. One system is based on faith. One system uses lies. The other system uses truth. And this faith system leads to life. This lies, fear system leads to death. If someone has Alzheimer's and dementia, how's their reason, intellect and judgment? Gone. So these little calcified deposits build up here, causing a compromise in the function of the prefrontal cortex. I'd like to suggest that the father of lies, the great deceiver, is going to do all he can to try and take that prefrontal cortex down, because our decisions determine our destiny. There's a cleaning system. What's the early parts of the night? 9, 10, 11, 12, before midnight. When we sleep in the early parts of the night, there's a glymphatic system. It's like the brain's vacuum cleaner. It's made out of glial cells. It cleans up the waste in the brain. So when we go to bed early every night, our glymphatic system is going to clean up any little bits of calcified deposits that begin to start. So one of the best safeguards against depression is go to bed early. One of the best safeguards against dementia and Alzheimer's, go to bed early. One lady said, but Barbara, I can't sleep. I said, don't say that again, because our words affect our mind. That when you say you can, you will, and if you say you can't, you're right, you won't. You see, we've got a brain that can be rewired and it can be trained. The first law is sunshine. Why is sunshine so important with depression? Because the ultraviolet rays from the sun go through neurochemical pathways, hit the pineal gland and release serotonin. Have you heard of serotonin? That's your mood hormone. Sunshine. How simple is that? Dr. Carolyn Leaf says when we forgive, and it's a decision, it's not a feeling, because our feelings will say they don't deserve it, hold on to it. No. Our sound mind says, this makes sense, let it go. Because God says in the Bible, vengeance is mine, I will repay. Leave it with him, he'll do a better job. Our role is to just let it go. Our job is to forgive. You don't have to feel like it. How could you? Just do it. Because the law of the mind states, as the days go by, you start to feel like it a bit more. That's a law of the mind. This is an important part of rewiring your brain, is letting go of the pain and rewiring your brain to the healing ways. Very important with depression. Dr. Carolyn Leaf says when we go to bed early and we've made the decision to forgive, we activate the cleaning system. And the cleaning system comes along and those little glial cells vacuum clean up the thorns. Isn't it incredible what medicine shows us today? That forgiveness actually has a physiological effect to clean up the brain cells.